Fabricadabra at LPL presents Felt Sugar Skull Sachets. Today we're going to make these cute little felt sachets using hand embroidery techniques and of course felt. You can stuff the sachets or not. Types of stuffing would be cotton. You could put potpourri inside of them, or you could even put another piece of felt that's been saturated with some essential oils. First, we're going to start with patterns. You're going to want a pattern for a skull head, an eye, and a nose. You may also want one for some teeth. If you got one of our grab-and-go kits, this will be included in it. You're also going to want various colors of felt. Here I'm going to be cutting the head out of the turquoise. I'm going to be cutting the eyes and nose out of the black felt. I'm going to use the white felt for teeth. And then, of course, the three other colored pieces I'm going to use for embellishing the skull. Next is embroidery thread of varying colors. Each of these can be split into 6 embroidery threads. You want to use 2 to 3 threads for your embroidery. Here are some items that you may find useful to complete your project. Something to mark the felt with is very helpful when you're embroidering. Pen, pencil, marker, chalk. You may want pins, but you're definitely going to want some embroidery needles. These are longer and they have bigger eyes through which to put the several pieces of embroidery thread. Finally, you may want a ruler, and you're definitely going to want a pair of scissors. Next up, I'm going to show you a little technique for cutting these tiny pieces out of your felt. Take some regular clear tape and use that to tape your pattern onto the felt. Then when you cut it off, you can easily pull any of the tape off, but you get a much easier pattern cut. Okay, so now we're going to take these little pieces that come with the pattern, and this is how I'm going to make my teeth, because I didn't have a pattern for the teeth. It didn't come with this. So what I'm doing is drawing lines on the side and then putting down the felt over it so I can see how wide my teeth need to be. And then I'm just going to kind of draw a line right there. You can make it more square. That's actually easier to embroider. But you can also make it more rounded. And then here I'm also using an ink pen to draw in my tooth lines. And the reason I'm doing this is because this is where I'm going to embroider. So I really want to get this right. Now here's a technique that I use when I'm working with felt, because as you're handling it, it can get frayed a lot on the edges. So what I do is I take a lighter, and I'm just going to barely brush that flame along the edge. And what that does is it sort of melts it, because I'm using a polyester felt instead of a wool felt. It melts those edges together, and so it keeps them from fraying as much. Embroidery stitches are where the magic happens. We're going to use some simple stitches that I'm going to show you, starting with the running or basting stitch. This is the most simple of stitches. You want to come up from the back of the felt and pull your needle all the way through, pull your thread through until it hits the knot at the end. And then you want to find your stitch length, and you're just going to simply press the needle back through the felt and then pull it through from the back, and you've created your first running or basting stitch. Then you want to come up another stitch length from the bottom and then another stitch length through the top. Now you've created 2 stitches. Now once you get going, you can actually do several stitches at once by coming up and going through the fabric just like this with your needle, and then pulling that through, and now you've done several stitches at one time. Here is your final stitch, and when you do that, You want to flip it over to the back. You want to catch a little of the felt or the thread, create a loop, put your needle through the loop, creates a little knot, and then you simply snip it off. The back stitch. It's a very simple stitch again. So just like with the running stitch, we're going to do a straight line, and we're going to come up through the back and pull our thread all the way through until it hits the knot. And then we're going to choose our stitch length and go forward and push the needle through the top, back through to the bottom. So you can see it's a lot like the running stitch, or at least it's starting out that way. Okay, so now we're going to go another stitch length up through the back. This should be familiar to you. But instead of going forward, we're actually going to go backward to that first stitch, the end of the first stitch, and we're going to put our needle in through there. And pull it through. And you've got your second back stitch. And that's why they call it the back stitch, because you're going to go forward, and then you're going to go back. And forward, and back. This stitch is really good, especially the smaller your stitches are. This is really good if you want to make circles, if you want to do swirls, if you want to make vines, things like that. Next up is the straight stitch, which is very much like its name implies. The straight stitch is usually used to create a different kind of shape. So I'm going to show you first how you can make a star out of the straight stitch. So I'm using a marker to mark points on the felt. And this is going to give me a good frame of reference when I'm actually doing the straight stitches. So I used a permanent marker there. You could use pretty much anything that'll show up. So we're going to start at the center, and we're going to come up through the back and pull it until you hit the knot. Okay, and then we're going to choose one of our points, and we're just going to make one stitch that way. That's a straight stitch. Just one stitch that is straight. Okay, then we're going to come back and go through the bottom again, right in the middle, and then we're going to go on the next point in the star. And there's our second straight stitch. And we're going to do it again. We're going to come up through the middle and then go down through the next point. There we go. And like I said, you can make a lot of different things using a straight stitch. And in fact, you can also just simply use the stitches as a decorative piece on their own. So you can do sort of a series of slanted straight stitches right next to each other, just to draw some visual interest on whatever project you're doing. Okay, so you can see I did 3 little straight stitches next to each other, and I did the star. Okay, the whip stitch. The whip stitch is typically used to add one piece of felt to another piece of felt. So we're going to start again from the back. So you're going to come out through to the top from the back. I'm starting on the point of the star. You can start wherever you like. And I'm starting right outside that second piece of felt. And then I'm going into that second piece of felt. And of course I'm using a contrasting thread so that it shows up, because everything about this project is that this is visible. This is something you want to see. Okay, and so you can actually do this either way. You can come up from the inside, or you can come up from the outside. So I've come up from the outside again, and then I'm going to choose another point in the yellow piece of felt and then pull the needle through. And I'm going to just keep going around like that. You know, I'm starting on the outside of the felt. Again, you can start on the inside of that second piece of felt and then go to the outside. You just want to stay consistent so that you don't forget what you're doing while you're doing it. And you can put more or less. You can put smaller stitches of these whip stitches in, or you can do larger ones. You can even mix them up and just do a variety of lengths of stitches. And that all goes towards that visual interest that you want to create in any kind of an artistic piece. And don't forget to make your loop in the back. And there you go, that's the whip stitch. Blanket stitch. This stitch is used as a decorative detail, but it also has a function of either closing something up or putting two pieces together. And that's what we're going to use it for. So we have this green piece of felt in a circle, and we are going to do a blanket stitch. So you're going to start from the back of the circle, but not the back of the orange felt. You're going to pull that through. Okay? And you're going to do that from the middle. And then you're going to go to the edge of the green felt and come out through the bottom. Okay? Just like I'm doing here. Okay? Then what I do is I come back up through that same hole and I begin my actual blanket stitch, which is going to happen one stitch length over on the inside of the circle. You're going to pull the thread through, and here you go. So it creates this loop. So now you're at the back, and you're going to come up through the back, and you're actually going to come up through the loop at the same place where you went in. So you're going to come up on the edge, and you see how those 2 points match. So you're going to come up like that, and you're going to pull taut, but not too tight. And see, that creates this kind of like little ledge on top. Okay, and now you're going to just keep following the same direction and the same pattern. You're going to go over one stitch on the green felt, and you're going to pull it through until there's a loop. Okay, and then you're going to come up through the bottom, and you're going to pull that taut. Okay, and then just keep doing the same thing. And I'm so sorry, when I was filming this, the camera, I kept going off angle. It's really hard to do these stitches filming wise because I don't have all the equipment I would really need to do this well. So I'm doing the best I can here. So again, go over one, go through till there's a little, leave a little bit of a loop, and then you're going to come up through the back just through the orange and pull that through the loop. And no, I didn't do this fast. I actually sped up this film, so I'm not a super fast sewer. I'm actually pretty slow. Okay, and you're going to go all the way around. If for some reason you were to run out of thread, you can actually just make a stitch, go back through to the bottom, cut it off, make your knot, cut it off, and then start with a new stitch with new thread. I'm not showing you that here, but you can do that. So now I'm down to the final 2 stitches. So I'm going to come up, go through my loop, and now I just need a line that goes across those 2. And so that's what I've just done. I just go back down. Lazy daisy stitch, which I also call the petal stitch. So I'm going to show you kind of a deconstructed petal, couple of petals from the lazy daisy, and then I'll actually do a lazy daisy so you can see You're going to come up through the point where your petal would meet the stem. And then you're actually going to go back down through that same hole that you came up through. And you're going to leave, again, a little loop. Kind of like with the blanket stitch. And then this, you're going to come up at the point where you would want your petal to end, so where you would want the outer part of the petal to be. And you're going to pull it, again, you're going to pull it, but you don't want to pull it too tight because then you'll lose that sort of a bell or belling out that you have that makes it look like a petal. So once you do that, you're going to lock that petal in by simply coming up, going back down on the other side of the thread loop. So here we are again, and this may explain it a little bit better. You come up through the petal, the middle of the petal, and then you're going to go back down through the very same hole, creating a loop. Okay. Then you're going to come up through the back where you want your petal to end. Okay. And you're going to pull that so that it creates a kind of a little petal shape. Okay. Then you're going to put your needle back through on the other side of the loop, and that holds it down. It locks it down. So those are just some 2 free-floating petals. Now we're going to come up, I'm going to show you the full Lazy Daisy. So we're going to put these petals together. You're going to come up through the middle of where you want your flower to be. And you're going to go back down and do your first Lazy Daisy stitch. Okay? And leave your little loop. And you're going to come up on the inside of the loop. Pull it through. And then come down on the opposite side, so the outside of the loop. And there's your first petal. And you're going to go all the way around, and you can put as many petals as you like, or as few. You're going to come back up through the middle again, go back down, create your loop, put your needle up through the back, and then put it, tack it down with that little stitch. And so here we go again, coming up through the middle, going back down through the middle, creating the loop that's going to be the petal. And then you come up through on the inside of the loop and back down through the outside of the loop. And now you've created a third petal. And so here's the finished product. These are all my petals. And it's really cute. It makes a cute little flower pattern. But you could also just do free floating petals, and that's also nice. The French knot is a knot and not an actual stitch. Here we're going to start from the back. Pull the thread up through the felt till you hit the knot. And then we're going to get a little closer so I can show you. You're going to take your needle tip and you're going to wrap your thread twice around it. And then you're going to put the needle back through the hole you came up out of. Now you're going to gently hold on to that kind of loop you have going as you pull the thread through. And there is your knot. Yay! Okay, we're going to do a second one just to show you again. It's really simple. Up through the bottom, wrap the thread twice around your needle, and then put your needle back through the same hole that you came up out of. A lot of people told me that this was really hard to do. I find it's really simple. Up through the bottom, wrap your thread around your needle twice, and then put it back in through the hole. And pull it through, and there's your knots. Now we're going to take all those stitches we've learned and put them to good use on our sugar skull. I'm going to show you how I put my sugar skull together. But if you want to sub out any of the stitches for the stitches I'm using, feel free to do so. If you don't want to use a blanket stitch, you can use a whip stitch or a back stitch or a running stitch. It's really just up to you and how you want your skull to look. We're going to begin with the face of the skull. I started with the eyes, and I'm going to use a yellow embroidery thread to do a blanket stitch. Okay, next up, I'm going to put the nose. And for the nose, I'm going to use that same yellow thread and do a whip stitch. Okay, next up is the mouth. For the mouth, I'm going to do 2 stitches. The first is a back stitch. I'm doing it in a kind of pinkish red color, and it goes straight across the middle. And then I'm going to go around the edge of it with a blanket stitch in the same thread. Here we have 2 green circles that I have attached to the eyes with a lavender French knot. And here we have an orange star that I have attached with a whip stitch in a darker purple, and then a darker purple French knot in the middle. Next up, I put 2 lavender colored stars on either side of the orange star. And then I decided to use the pinkish red to do French knots around both eyes. And finally, I finished it with 2 purple lacy daisies on what would be the cheekbones. To finish this project off, I have some essential oil in lavender. I have a little piece of yellow felt that I had left over. I have the face piece and the back piece of the skull. And of course, I have a contrasting thread that I'm going to put all around it using a blanket stitch. Again, you could use a different stitch like a whip stitch or a straight stitch or a back stitch. Here I'm putting on the essential oil onto the felt. You could use something different like cotton or potpourri or rice. And here's the finished product. I used a blanket stitch all the way around to close it off. Again, I used the yellow contrasting thread. And here's the back of the piece. And this is why we use a backing, is because it hides all the threads from the embroidery on the front. And here is a sample that I made previously. This one I did differently. I filled it with cotton. There's less embellishments on it, and the mouth part I did with a back stitch. And it's filled, of course, filled with cotton and a little essential oil as well. So here we are back to the first piece, just so you can see the differences. So you can really go wild with the embellishments, or you can stay more simple. It's up to you. Thank you for joining me, and happy sewing.